You can't put that genie back in the bottle. That's destructive shit. And suddenly you're locking your bathroom door every time you're not using it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
You know who else is locked in the bathroom?
Who's that?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Pixel. My name is Kevin. With me as always is Phil. And on today's show, we are covering Seventh Guest. There it is. Woo! Seventh Guest. A novel. Right there, a novel. It's mirrored on my screen.
And you can tell because it says so.
It says so. It says a novel.
Yes.
By Matthew J. Costello and Craig Shaw Gardner. So, Seventh Guest. It's a game. It was an FMV game released in 1993, I want to say. Hold on, I'm pulling it up right now.
Very beginning of 93.
Yeah. So, it's a trilobite game released by Virgin Interactive, and it's full on just FMV point and click stuff. You know, if you've played any of the FMVs, it was a Phantasmagoria was one of them. None of them were like, I'm not going to say that they weren't good. They were just not. You couldn't be uncheesy with them.
They were campy. Yeah,
they were very campy.
Like, because you weren't getting at that point. You weren't getting like Sean Penn, coming in to be in your fucking video game. You were getting community theater people at best.
Yeah.
So they tended to be real campy.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is that there's a Seventh Guest VR thing on that you can get, which is it's had pretty positive reactions. It was released in 2023. It's the iconic supernatural mystery, The Seventh Guest, brought back to life with cutting edge VR technology. So, I mean, it's out there if you want to get it on VR. And I think it's straight up the original game remade as a VR game. Yeah.
I mean, which isn't too hard because it was first person, which a lot of FMV games aren't.
Right.
So yeah.
The basic gist of the game was you're going through a mansion, you're solving puzzles. Then there you go. I mean, I'm not going to get into the plot of the game because we're about to get into the book. And from Phil, who played the game, you played the game, right?
Yeah.
From Phil, who played the game, it's the same.
It's mostly the same. We'll get into this, but I will say that the authors, they really did actually make an effort on this one. Whether or not that effort succeeds is yet to be decided upon. But it's just another one of the corny point and click FMV games that Kevin and I love to find novelizations for. Right? Yeah, exactly. The Seventh Guest was actually a really important game. It came out the same year Myst did, and they were like, it was the first computer game that came out on CD-ROM only. And that was when people were kind of like weighing their options when it came to
CD-ROM thing.
Right. It was so much more expensive. Yeah. Is this worth it? And Seventh Guest, and then later that year Myst sold it. If without those games, we don't have we don't have games as we know them now. So they were pretty important.
Yeah.
Just goofy as fuck is all. That's all.
Yeah. So, Seventh Guest, a game that is also made by the same company, was 11th Hour. So if you ever saw 11th Hour and it was like, hey, this looks familiar to the Seventh Guest, it's because it's the same company. Trilobite Games lasted until 1999, where it was closed down. After some shenanigans with the Learning Company and Broderbund and all that stuff. Broderbund, blast from the past.
Broderbund. They did Carmen Sandiego, right?
That's correct.
Fucking A. Yes.
Broderbund.
I still get a tickle to play that old school Carmen Sandiego shit. I fucking loved it so much.
I love the format of Carmen Sandiego as a game. I love that style of game.
Yeah.
And I've always thought it would be really cool to kind of reinvent that, like go to multiple locations, do some investigation. And they're not very long, but you could just, do it. And I remember, I think in Carmen Sandiego, there's an element of randomization. Like it would be like, it's this guy from this location.
Yeah, because they had multiple criminals, and each one of them were different in different ways, and you had to slowly through the process of elimination based on what people saw,
right?
Come up with it. And if you took the wrong path, you also get clues about where they went in the next country they went to, and if you took the wrong turn, then you were kind of fucked. Like you could theoretically catch up, but you might as well just start over at that point.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the founders of Trilobite is Graham Devine, who he was involved in Quake 3 Arena. So it's just kind of like I recognize that name, Graham Devine. I think he was in Masters of Doom. He might have been mentioned.
I think he was. I think you're absolutely right.
Anyway, yeah. So that's kind of like the game. It's relatively important, as Phil said, in its place in gaming history. So we're gonna go ahead and do the book. Phil, who did the book? Who are these two people on the cover?
Well, first we've got Matthew Costello, who actually wrote the screenplay. I don't know if that's the correct term for video games, but he wrote Seventh Guest. He wrote the 11th Hour. He also wrote for a few of the Doom games. He wrote for Resident Evil 4. I believe I think he helped with the localization for the most recent version of it.
Okay.
But he's written a lot, really random stuff. Everything from like Rage, if you remember Rage, to Barbie's Writing Club. Like he's got a lot
all over the map.
All over the map. He's done a lot of write for hire stuff. He wrote a book called Island of the Skull, which was an original prequel to the Peter Jackson King Kong movie.
Okay.
And he's done a lot of stuff for, role-playing games, D&D, Call of Cthulhu. He's written a ton of his own stuff too, mostly, genre fiction, mystery stuff. He's a pretty prolific guy. His partner in this is Craig Shaw Gardner, who is far more kind of down the line fantasy, sort of writer.
Right.
He's done a lot of trilogies and stuff like that. Nothing that offhand I've heard of. The Changeling War is probably the one I've heard the most of. But he's also, like a lot of these guys, a write for hire guy. He wrote the novelization for Batman and Batman Returns, which I think is fucking kick ass. And he wrote The Lost Boys, the novelization for The Lost Boys. Yeah.
How much does the novelization for The Lost Boys spend on, what's his name? Sexy Sax Man?
Hopefully a lot. I hope we get a background story on Sexy Sax Man with his long hair and his muscles and shit. I know that if I were assigned the novelization of The Lost Boys.
Tim Capello. There we go.
I would at least have a chapter. Just a quick chapter telling us a little more about him.
You know what? I think I just heard this. It might have been in the novelization.
What, really?
Where they, because I was watching Dead Meat Presents was doing their Horror Royal Rumble, where basically they take the most recent WWE wrestling game and they create 30 horror characters. And they do the Royal Rumble with them.
What a great idea.
It's actually a really fun video. I'll send you the link.
That
so what
fun.
they did is one of the characters was Tim Capello, who is the guy who plays the Sexy Sax Man in Lost Boys. And, he's running up and they're talking about how they wish they had a saxophone prop that they could have given him.
That would be amazing.
But I think they said that in the novelization, the background. It was either in the novelization or like a deleted scene from the screenplay or something, that the reason this guy is there, like that character was supposed to be a vampire hunter.
No shit. I mean, you know what? That actually makes some sense. Because he was conspicuously like jacked. That's hilarious.
I mean, I
have to find a copy of the novelization.
Maybe I'm misremembering it, but I remember they said it on the Horror Royal Rumble, and I just watched it today because they did it live on Saturday.
That's amazing. That's good timing, is what that is. Now I have to. I now have to find the novelization of Lost Boys and find out if that's in there. That would be amazing, especially if we're reading something by the guy who came up with that. He also did the novelizations for Back to the Future 2 and 3, which is pretty cool.
Oh, okay. So, what about Back to the Future 1?
Not as far as I know.
Okay. Who did Back to the Future 1? Let
me see.
Is that Alan Dean Foster special or?
That would be awesome. Novelization. Here we go. Here it is.
George Gipe.
George Gipe.
That's a name.
That is a name. It makes sense that you would need to get a genre guy for the second and third one.
Well, and also the second and third one and how they were handled, where they were written and shot at the same time.
Right.
So you probably gave it to both of them to one guy at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, I found an autographed copy of his novelization of Back to the Future 2.
Oh, all right.
Could add that to the collection. So we've got a couple of pros here. One specifically works in games a lot. The other one who has a lot of novelization. They both have some novelization background, but Gardner's definitely the heavy when it comes to that.
Exactly. And Costello to be... Costello actually we're going to be reading another one of his books coming up soon-ish.
I'm excited about this one.
He was coming up next. He was he did the novelization of one of the Doom 3 novelizations, which is going to be, several years after this one, at least 10 years, I assume, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh, easily. Yeah.
There's a decade between the two of them. So we'll see. It will be a nice comparison, because we've never done that before. We've never actually read the same author back to back. We've done a bunch of authors, obviously, with Resident Evil and Kira Breed Reesley. We had 3 and all that. But yeah, we've never done an author back to back, and so I'm curious as to how this will.
Two very different genres.
Very different genres. Dark horror, sci-fi, versus
campy horror, point and click kind of thing.
Versus FMV.
Right. Well, yes. You know what? Yeah, that kind of says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah. So. Before we put the body in the marsh, I want to tell you all about a fantastic website. Listen, I know you're all worried about what's going on out there with the Orange Man and his blood diamond having friend. But you know where there's a home for you. It's on the Pixelit Patreon and the Pixelit Discord. Hop on over to patreon.com/pixelitpod and you can join for free. And just joining for free gets you access to the episodes a day early when I have the wherewithal to do that, which it's like 90% of the time. Let's be honest. It's a lot of most of the time I can get the episodes up early for the patrons.
Yeah, you're pretty on the ball. You're good.
Yeah. And from that, you can also join the Discord, where we have a lovely group of leftist dads just chatting about all sorts of things.
It has been the amount, the catering of the leftist dads we have. We didn't mean to do this, I guess is my point.
But we did. But we got it.
It's worked out very nicely.
So patreon.com/pixelitpod, $10 a month at the top end gets your name shouted out in every episode. So to that end, I want to shout out our $10 a month peoples. That's going to be Jesus Loves You, Kyle Seaman, Ruthless Mutter, Middle of Things, Sigma Sal, Chet Beaks Dumma Thick, Langolier, and Friendly Friend. Thank you for being a friend. Yes, Phil, that's a new name on the list.
I was about to say, I'll be damned. Okay.
Langolier. That's a Stephen King right there.
That's a reference.
That's a reference. Now we just need Tommy Knockers.
Or Tommy's Knockers.
Or Tommy's Knockers.
Yeah. That would be good.
That would be good.
Make Kevin say Tommy's Knockers, somebody. Make him say it like every episode.
Well, I already say Chet Beaks Dummy Thick every episode, so.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's fair enough.
Anyway, body in the marsh.
When I tell you to dump a body in the marsh, you dump them in the marsh.
Body in marsh. Let's go. Seventh guest, chapter 1. We open up with Henry Stauff, who is a 2-bit criminal. He's coming out of a robbery that's gone sideways, and he's hiding out in a small town that he's from, I think. We find out later that he's from this area. We learn more about the robbery, the fact that he threw away his gun, which he considers to be pretty stupid. But he's got voices in his head that are guiding him on, and that's kind of giving him strength. He's starving. He falls asleep in the cold, and the voices guide him to a construction site where he steals a hammer.
And he loves this hammer. This
hammer.
It's got the right weight in his hand.
Right. Very, very emphatic about how much he loves this hammer. He loves his tools, as we'll find out.
Yeah. Big fan.
Exactly. And he ends up kind of in a forest or a park or something, and he hears somebody singing to themselves. It's this young girl, not girl. She's like, I don't know. Did they ever say an age? It's like I pictured like late high school, early college.
I thought this was an old woman.
Oh, I thought it was a girl. Maybe I messed it up. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It's a person. It's a human being.
It's a human being.
And this person seems to is talking to him and sees what a state he's in and pities him as he interprets it. And that drives him to crush her skull with the hammer. That's chapter 1. So right off the bat, we're getting into
just right into the,
right into it.
It's a lot right off the bat.
Yeah. Chapter 2, we are introduced to Edward Knox. He's an older man. We've learned that he is in debt to some mobsters, 2 of which are in his home currently, demanding payment. He tells them that he has an invitation to attend an event that's being held by, I don't think they quote it, but you can imagine quote unquotes, rich old Mr. Stauff, and he will pay them back afterwards.
Right.
The fact that he's going there seems to convince them that he'll be as good as his word, and they leave. His wife arrives, and he shows her the invitation. She touches it, and it causes her to scream uncontrollably.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our introduction to these 2. Very, very interesting. These are fast chapters, by the way. It's a fast book. So chapter 3, we cut back in time, back to Stauff, who throws away the hammer that he has used to kill the woman. He finds $6 in her purse, and he considers the fact that he killed her and feels no guilt. He kind of goes over that in his head. Kind of am I fucked up? Am I the baddie? Kind of moment, but he kind of accepts that that's what he is, and he's fine with it.
Yeah.
The cops pick him up for the robbery. Because he did it.
He did it. Yeah.
But when they find this murder victim, they don't assume that he did it,
because there was another person stealing the jacket off of the body. So they're like, it's probably that guy. This guy did the robbery. That guy did the murder. That's the end of that investigation.
Very timely, to be honest.
Very timely.
these details never get old.
No.
So they throw him in jail, and he has a moment in his cell where he sits there thinking about how he is meant for great things. But he just needs the voices to point him in the direction of these great things. Chapter 4, we meet Brian Dutton, who wakes up from another nightmare about his dead brother. This one gets heavy.
His name is Kevin, which is hilarious because my brother's name is Brian.
It's Brian. Yes. And it gets better / worse.
Better.
Because Brian is the younger brother in this situation. It's reversed in our host Kevin's situation. Yes. But we get kind of a classic story about how the younger brother is living in his older brother's shadow. The older brother is this perfect older brother who can do anything. He's the athlete. He's a genius, et cetera, et cetera. And they're ice skating, and of course his brother is like fucking triple gainers and shit like that. Right. He's a great skater. And the little brother Brian wishes to himself that there was something that he could do better than Kevin. And it turns out there is. It's called not dying. Because poor Kevin, I guess he did that old chestnut of one too many times on the same loop.
One too many times on the same patch of ice, and down he goes.
And boom, down he goes. We get a moment where young brother Brian is like, he's watching him flail and die, and he's begging his younger brother to go get help. And Brian just kind of watches him, not for a long time.
Just has a moment of like,
has a moment.
I could just let this happen, right?
I could just let this happen. I could just wait until the bubbles stop and then go get help. But he does end up, but actually it's before he even needs to leave that his brother's dead. And he sees his body floating under the ice.
Face pressed up against the ice.
Yeah. Nice and gruesome. Pretty good shit, honestly. Yeah. Now we cut back to Brian as an adult. He has become a businessman. It's very vague on what kind of business it is. He has factories, or he has a factory. He has these big dreams of becoming like this magnate, I guess.
He's a factory man.
Yeah, exactly. But he's got one kind of dinky factory in town. And
by the way, this is all taking place in like the 1930s or something like that. I can't remember when exactly is it the
flashback
is in the 30s. We're talking about
that's the Depression. It's Prohibition.
Okay.
It's the 20s. And but you're right, because it flashes forward when Stauff is, when all these people are getting their invitations, Stauff is like old man Stauff. So the implication is like, I don't know, like
70s,
40s, maybe 70s, something like that.
Or 60s, or I don't know.
Yeah, 60s or 70s, but it's definitely it's vague. Yeah. In fact, the timey-wimey shit in this book is actually addressed at one point where it's kind of like, this doesn't really make sense.
Sure.
But we've got Brian Dutton in his dinky little factory. He is assuming and / hoping that the invitation from Stauff is an invite for him to take over Stauff's toy business.
Because he's like, I'm a factory guy, so I should, this makes sense.
I can help because we have learned that Stauff is this famous, ultra rich toy maker, that he hand makes all these toys, and all the kids got to have one of his toys, and he's made his fortune off of it. And so Brian immediately starts thinking of like, well, how can we could probably, he does what these fuckers do. He's like, how can we mass produce
how
these
could
things?
We take these bespoke, very intricate toys and make it so that everybody can have one all the time
immediately. And
since the beginning of time, people have been like, you know how Jeff Bezos made Amazon, right? Yeah. This Amazon was not where Amazon is today. Not an original idea. Motherfuckers have been trying to make Amazon since the dude who had the copper guy, the bad copper guy. graffiti. What is that guy's name? World's first customer service complaint. There we go.
Yeah, I don't know this.
Nasir is Nasir is it's the original customer service complaint from like 4,000 years ago about how he.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. It was like on a tablet. It's like on a stone tablet.
It's on a stone tablet. This customer service complaint to E.A. Nasir about his shitty product. And I mean, you know why? I bet that guy was trying to fucking mass produce it. You know, he was trying to just like cut down the quality, bring up the speed so he can make more, more profit. That is what Jeff Bezos is, just that guy reincarnated. And Brian Dutton in this book is that it's just Jeff Bezos made it happen. He was just right time, right place. But motherfuckers have been trying to do that for, 4,000 years. So
none of these guys are doing anything but reinventing the wheel.
Exactly.
So, yeah, none of them are doing anything really original, like hosting a podcast about video game novelizations.
That is peak originality.
Anyway. That's chapter 4. Chapter 5, we are flashing back again. We're going to be going back and forth every other chapter here. We get a flashback to Stauff. He is getting out of jail for the robbery. He is in front of the judge and he is listening to the voices in his head as they tell him how to act. They're like, don't talk back to the judge. Say you've learned your lesson, be humble. And the voices kind of like guide him through the process. And as a result, the judge kind of takes pity on him and just releases him. Like he's had some jail time and they just let him go basically.
They're like, days. you paid restitution, you paid back the money, you can go.
Yeah. There you go. And meanwhile, the guy, the homeless guy who was caught and accused of killing the woman that Stauff killed, hanged himself in his cell.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I mean,
so that story's all nice and tied up,
buttoned up. The random act of murder that Stauff committed, it's all good.
It's all good. All good. He doesn't have to. He's so you can imagine he's leaving the jail with a bit of a swing in his step. He's feeling good. He's listening to the voices and they are sending him out into the world again. They're guiding him towards something. And they guide him back to the construction site for a moment. And he starts going, well, am I going to steal another hammer? But that doesn't feel right. I don't feel like I'm going to do that. And the feeling that he's getting keeps pushing him forward until he finds, like, basically in the middle of the road, a small sharp knife. And oh boy,
is this knife for a stabbing?
Oh, yeah, exactly. He's like, what's the knife for? What's the knife for? Come on. He's waiting for the voices to tell him. And he has a vision of a wooden doll, a very intricately, beautifully carved wooden doll. And then he sees a branch nearby on a tree in the park, and he sees the doll inside the branch. And it's kind of an old idea with, I think it was Michelangelo who said something like that the sculpture was in there. I just had to release it from the marble. And he has a thought like that my doll is in this branch. I just need to carve it, and realizes that's what the knife is for. So I'm sure he's a little disappointed that it isn't a stabby.
It's not a stabby, no.
Right. He's getting good at that. I'm sure that was a bit of a bummer, but all the same, he's got a purpose now, and that's what's important. Chapter 6, we flash forward. Martine Burden. Great damn character name. I've got that written right. Martine Burden, like a beast of burden. Great name. She gets a certified letter from a leering mailman. We get her backstory as she's the kind of one of the great beauties of the town, who's felt that she's like too good for the town, and she ran away with a mysterious foreign noble, as far as she knew, and ran around New York, the upper crust of Manhattan, living the good life with this count.
I'm imagining her as Leslie Ann Warren.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I can see that.
Is that too much, or is that
No.
what would you say? Is that
I think that works. I think she, yeah. I think I don't know if she's at that age point yet, but like,
sure.
Yes. I think that's a good choice.
Leslie Ann Warren in Clue.
Yeah. Well, actually, yes. And you know what? Yeah. Specifically, we're talking about Miss Scarlet. Then.
Yeah. Miss Scarlet.
Yeah, that's totally it. Yeah. Then that's totally it. She does have that vibe. Like she keeps telling us that she's a great beauty, but we don't know for sure. But we do have the mailman who, like, she interprets it as him leering at her. He's just staring.
Right.
And she answered the door in her kimono. And what am I supposed to do? Get all my makeup done so the mailman can see me properly? It's that kind of thing. She has been abandoned after I think it's very fast. It's like 2 weeks in Manhattan with this nobleman,
right,
who leaves her for the new model. And she has to come home with her tail between her legs, and everybody in town hates her. Because she got too big for her britches and that sort of thing. And she's really frustrated and pissed off about that. She has also received an invite from Stauff. And kind of like she kind of toys with the idea of like, well, I've been with older men before. Like, right. It's kind of a, we get the invitations, we find out what they're assuming that they want and what they think that they can get, from rich old man Stauff. Chapter 7, we flash back. Stauff has carved the doll out of the branch in the park in, as far as we can tell, one go. And it is exactly the way he saw it in his vision.
And it is the most perfect doll ever made.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exquisite. It's expertly handcrafted. You would think that he's been studying to do this his entire life. And not that this is the first doll he's ever made, but the voices had kind of like guided his hand.
Yeah.
So he hasn't, they're very emphatic on the fact that he has not had a drink in 6 days because he's been in jail for 6 days and he's got to get himself a drink. So he knows a speakeasy that he and a bunch of the other drunks go to in town, and he goes there to celebrate. He walks in on a screaming match between the owner of the bar, who's the bartender, and his 7-year-old daughter, who he's trying to get her to like mop the floor or some goddamn
just
thing.
Do something.
And she's flipping out because all of her friends are going out playing, and I'm 7. I should not be cleaning your goddamn speakeasy, Dad.
Right.
That whole thing. So Stauff has no money. And so he says, and he says, what can I, he basically holds up the doll and says, how many beers for this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And as he's doing that, the little girl just kind of like is magnetized by it, enchanted, big eyes coming over towards it and just in love with it. And is just kind of the happiest that the bartender has ever seen her. And he's like, look, man, if you can give her that, I will give you free drinks all afternoon. And Stauff says, sold. And the little girl spends the rest of the day kind of like dancing around the bar with this doll, just purely enchanted by it, maybe literally.
Right.
And the bartender says, hey, if you can make her some more toys, I'll give you a room and board. I've got a room in the back with a workshop. And if you make her some more stuff, I'll put you up for a week or so. We know Stauff's going to become incredibly wealthy because this was clearly his foot in the door.
Whatever happens to the taverns and the bars that had like, yeah, you have a room for you or whatever, just had a couple of rooms for rent. You go to it's just like a JRPG holdover nowadays where we go and you're like, oh, I got a room too, but it's like
you got a bar. It's like, well, we got a couple of rooms upstairs, and you're like, oh, okay.
Whatever. Was that ever really a thing, or is that just like a
no? I honestly don't. The thing I always hear about is like, you got colonial stories and stuff, and there's always like the though it's usually a woman and she's got a family and maybe the husband's dead or he's off at war or something. And she's like, well, we have a room that you can rent for, 50 shillings a week or whatever it is. And
hey penny.
Hey penny. Yeah, exactly. It's probably that. And that's where the guy, whoever he's like a student or he's working, that's just where he lives for now. He's just living in this lady's extra
I'm
room.
living at the old Mrs. Mac.
Old Widow Flenderson's house.
Old Widow Flenderson's house, and old Widow Flenderson is 27.
Right, exactly. She's been married twice.
She's been married twice. She has 17 children.
Men who died under mysterious circumstances.
Old Widow Flenderson. Still a knockout.
I do remember. Yeah, of course. She's getting a little up there in age, but still, she's got it. She's got it going. I mean, I used to drink in college. There was a kind of a shitty bar, the dive that everyone went to, called the Brown Hotel, and it was the bar at the bottom of an even shittier hotel above. And I didn't know anyone who'd ever stayed there, but you could indeed get a room there. And at least I don't think I knew anyone who did. But I think that might be the closest thing I know to a holdover from those days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Chapter 8. We cut, flash forward, Julia Heine. I'm assuming it's Heine, because it makes me laugh. She was recently retired, quote unquote, from her bank job. Actually, she was forced out when they caught her drunk on the job again. She is an older woman. She's a lush, and she has a lot of pent up anger about growing old and how men treat her now because of that, which, you know what? Fair enough. If a brandy at lunch makes you feel better, I'm not going to say none of that personally. She has also gotten an invite from Stauff. She flashes back in her own head, remembering Karen, who was the first little girl, the daughter of the bartender, to get the doll, and how she died not long after she got the doll, and it was this big tragedy. And her theory on this, and this is some weird goddamn law of attraction, woo-woo shit. Like, I could hear people saying this now, basically that the doll was so perfect and it had a life-giving power, and that she was just too young and she couldn't handle it.
She couldn't handle the life-giving energy.
Yeah. So in a way, it's her fault when you think about it.
Yeah. In actuality, in the real world, it was that the doll was a totem of Slaanesh.
Right, pretty much. I mean, yeah. It was the totem of the god who turns people inside out.
Yeah.
And she is theorizing on she's kind of like a less successful version of Martine Burden, in the sense that, like, she wants to be a seductress in a way.
Sure.
She's just not very good at it. And so she's thinking, well, I'm going to go to Stauff, and he's an older man, so there's no way he can't appreciate an older woman. Right. I'm sure he'll appreciate all this. And you just imagine her shaking it.
All this going on.
All this. So she's going after the old man too.
Also,
in her own way.
With the kids, it was like 1 out of every 3 kids that had one of his dolls died.
Yes. We're going to find out that, like a massacre took place. They would contract a very strange, vague consumption style illness or something, and it killed most of them. Well, not most of a huge portion of them.
Yeah.
They basically almost miss a generation because of it.
Right.
And in chapter 9, we get a flashback to Stauff. We get a quick timeline. He's growing in success as a toy maker. He opens his own store. And he's still listening to the voices, but he doesn't know what the long-term plan is. They still haven't revealed to him what the end goal is. But his assumption, we learn, is that they're going to help him get revenge on this small town that looked down on him and spat on him and that kind of thing. He's got a serious, a lot of the people in this actually have a serious, you think you're better than me.
You think you're better than me?
Yeah. They got some serious Napoleon complex shit going on here. Chapter 10, we meet Hamilton Temple, another good name. He's an elderly former vaudeville magician. He was very talented, very good. And then vaudeville goes out of style. On top of that, he has terribly arthritic wrists and hands. And as any magician will tell you, it's all in the wrist. And he's not that person anymore. He's interesting because at first you assume that he's kind of that he's purely like a stage magician, but he clearly is very interested in the occult as well, because when he gets his invite from Stauff, he has been thinking about Stauff for a while and assumes that Stauff works in some kind of magic of his own.
Right.
And he's eager to learn that from Stauff. So that's his main motivation for getting in there. Chapter 11, we find out how many with the children are dying of this mysterious epidemic. Stauff alone seems to know that the toys are the reason, although there are whispers. People every now and then will the rumor that goes around town is like, well, the toys have got something to do with it.
Toys got something to do with it.
Because they all had a toy, but then again, most kids in the area have one of his toys because that's how popular he is.
It's one of those you can't really draw a correlation because also all the kids played on the rotting play set in the back of old McConnell's house. And they're all breathing in asbestos from the insulation. And they're all throwing things into the never-ending tire fire.
Right, exactly.
So it's like, what? I think we can.
There are a lot of things.
There's a lot of things.
A lot of things.
Our paint is leaded.
That's how you know it's good.
That's how you know it's good.
That's actually that was the original. It's toasted before its time. It's leaded.
It's leaded. Don Draper's ad campaign. He wish he took back.
Coffin nail cigarettes. They're leaded.
They're leaded.
The good shit. So he knows for a fact that he is what's killing these kids. And he does what any supervillain does in this moment. He builds an enormous fuck off Resident Evil style puzzle mansion, and disappears into it, closing the toy shop, never to be heard from again, as far as the villagers are concerned, until our invites go out. And he sits in this big ass mansion, waiting for the voices to give him, the next step. And we come to chapter 12. We have a nameless character outside of the mansion looking it over. This is where we get a moment where this nameless person kind of observes how time is strange in that area. That we're not sure when the deaths happen. When did the kids die? A long time ago, or did they die recently?
Yeah.
It's really interesting. It's same for the mansion itself. The mansion's this old rotting mansion. It's like, when did that happen? Was it always like this?
Was it always? Yeah.
Yeah. It had to have been new at some point, right? And it's not that old. And I really appreciated that. And then remembers and hears these kids singing their, Freddy's coming for you style nursery rhymes.
Yep.
And I'm going to read them here. Old man Stauff built a house and filled it with his toys. 7 guests all came one night. Their screams the only noise. Blood inside the library, blood right down the hall, blood going up the attic stairs where the last guest did fall. Not one soul came out that night. No one was ever seen. But old man Stauff is waiting there, crazy, sick, and mean. And that is chapter 12, and that is that's the first third of the book. That's as far as we're going for today. So, Kevin, what do you think so far of The Seventh Guest?
I had a little trouble kind of getting into it, if only because I was like, what the fuck is this going on with Stauf? And then Stauf's here. It took me a minute to realize, all right, we're jumping back and forth between timelines, I guess.
Sure.
Other than that, yeah, it's got a lot of fun characters, and names and all that stuff. And it's, I don't know what it is about the particular prose in this book that was giving me issues with like really locking in. You know what I mean? There's something about it that just feels like you're like, it's a little harder to down than you want it to be, because something about the way it's written or the prose or the sentence structure, however these guys are writing it. And what I'm assuming is that in the end, it was actually Gardner who wrote the book and Costello who wrote the outline basically of
what treatment or something.
The treatment, you know, if I'm assuming how that worked. So, but chapter 12 makes up for it in kind of a way where it's like, it has this really cool acknowledgement of like, it's like, oh yeah, you know, everyone died that night. Here's how it happens, you know?
Yeah.
Before we get into the next 2/3 of the book, which I assume are going to be all focused on that night or what have you. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I had a similar issue when I first started reading it. I felt like there were a couple of things. It felt overwritten.
Yes.
At times. It's
not long at all. And yet it's not. It's overwritten.
Yeah. It's very purple, let's say.
Yes.
It's very purple prose. It just doesn't. At first, to me, it didn't feel like, it was like, this is a video game. Like, guys, settle the fuck down. And it kind of felt like the project of an author who wanted to be taken seriously as a writer. Damn it. I know this is based on a video game, but I'm a serious writer.
I'm a serious writer. Yeah.
I got over it. I'm like you. At first, it took me a minute, but then when you get into the rhythm of it, you catch, and it became pretty quick read at that point. I think it's interesting, having played the game so far in this first third of the book. None of this, only a little of this has happened in the game so far. This is just background story about all the people you meet in this game,
right?
Which I think is a good use of the time, frankly. But as an adaptation, it's fascinating because, as we mentioned at the beginning of this is an old FMV game from 1993. It is campy.
Yeah.
The budget's low.
$3,500, by the way, was the budget.
Yes. It is low budget, not great actors. It's kind of silly, over the top. It is scary, especially in those days. You know, I remember being a little kid. It scared me, despite the fact that I also knew that it was very corny and kind of cheesy, but it was still effective at what it did. But the book is taking it deadly serious.
So serious.
And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, because this is an adaptation.
Right.
We've talked a lot about having problems with books where they follow the game too closely.
Yeah.
And it's like, why does this even exist? This has already kind of justified its existence.
In kind of
this new
almost
spin on
completing what's kind of, it's more or less completing the story, so to speak, filling it out a little bit more.
I think so. At least so far.
I would say the worst chapter to me was chapter 2, which is the first guest that we meet is Knox. It's just written so poorly that you don't really have I had to read it because I was like, what the fuck is going on? Where's this Stauf guy we were just with? Who's Knox? Why does he owe money? And why does this guy care? Like, why are we doing any of this?
I totally agree. I think that as far as the first chapter that flashes forward, it isn't handled well.
No.
I think the assumption is that if you read this, you played the game, and so they didn't feel the need to
it also like
explain too much.
It also does the thing of the book is being super serial. But then when it handles like organized crime people, it makes the goons kind of goofy. Yeah. And I'm like, if you're being serious, be serious, right? Like, in real, like these motherfuckers should be terrifying, not like Bert with goofy grins and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. A Warner Brothers cartoon flipping a coin as he talks about who's going to rub you out.
He's going to rub you out. See?
It does have that vibe. It truly does. But yeah, I think this is a really interesting start. I'm actually very happy with it so far. It's not like that's not the same as it being a good book. It's fine. It's perfectly serviceable as a book. It's fine. But as an adaptation, which is our bread and butter, I'm impressed with it so far. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Well, now that we've done that, Kevin, I only have one question left for you. What are you playing?
Oh, I was not expecting that.
I know. I just dropped this on you. It's not your fault.
I'm still playing Ender Magnolia, which is, I talked about that last week, I believe, which is the sequel to Ender Lilies. Just kind of plinking and plonking my way through it. It's my Steam Deck game, so my progress on it is based on how much I am, like if I'm sitting in bed at night versus sitting in the living room. If I'm sitting in bed, then I'm playing my Steam Deck. If I'm in the living room, then I'm just watching TV. So that's kind of like where progress is metered out by that.
By what's going on in the background.
By what's going on in the background. Sure. I started playing Foundation.
Yeah. How are you finding that so far? I really enjoyed that.
It's cute. It's a cute little concept where it's like, instead of, you build little buildings and you paint the little, and be like, all right, this is the area I want houses to be in. Just go ahead and do that. And it does that thing with the paths. I think is so cool. Where you, what is the term for that? Path of, is it desire or desire path? There we go.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. That's what that was called. That's funny.
It's called a desire path. And basically, there are examples of that where you have like, you can see it everywhere, right? You'll see like a paved sidewalk, but then you'll see a path in the grass where people always go through because that's where they actually want to walk to get to the place.
Right. They take the path of less least resistance.
Yeah. So, and what happens is there's actually a college or a university. I'm trying to find. Is it okay? Yeah, it's Ohio State. Instead of there used to just be a big lawn right in between the buildings. And then you would see these trails where people crossed, right? So instead of, when it came time to paving and putting in sidewalks, instead of like, all right, well, we're going to make it goes this way and it goes this way, they paved the desire paths. So like what people wanted to do naturally, it was then just like set in stone, literally. So that happens in Foundation, is that actually your little dudes start creating desire paths between the locations that they have to go to from their house to work to all that stuff, which is neat. It's kind of like a nice touch, so to speak. But I haven't put a ton into that, but it's neat so far. And what else have I been playing? I finally am back into Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader with the DLC and all that stuff. One of the cool things about the DLC is that at the very beginning, so I started a fresh save. and you get a new character. She is a what's her name? Hold on, I'm pulling it up. Steam.
Is she the sister, the zealot?
No. New DLC character, rogue trader. She is Cabela, a death cult assassin.
Nice.
Nice. The blood, like the web spinners, the bloody web spinner or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's good shit.
So you recruit her early on. Basically what happens is like she comes to you and she's like, we've been part of the Von Valancius dynasty, whether acknowledged or not, for a long time. Like basically Theodora, who's your predecessor, like never really acknowledged them, but they're like, we still did things in the shadows to help Theodora. So they approach you and they're like, hey, do you want one of our people to be part of your retinue? And you have this dinner with them, and then you're like, okay, now start the test. And the test is they have basically all the people from the mutiny with Kunrad are let loose into a room with her. It's just her. Oh. And part of the test is like killing all of them. And she has these moves. So she has a move called Death from Above, which lets her jump to any space that she could move to. Not any space she can move to. It's like jump within a pretty large distance. She jumps, lands, and attacks every space around her. And then she can do Dance of Blades, which then does that again. And then she gains an ability as you level her up to go back to her starting location that turn. So the Death from Above has no AP cost, but you have to have charges of it. So every time you kill somebody, you get a charge of Death from Above. So if you have several charges of Death from Above, you can go jump to this group, dice them up, jump to this group, dice them up, jump to this group, dice them up. And then there's an ability for her to start back to go back to her original tile. The way she does that is she'll repeat Death from Aboves. So then she'll jump back a group, Death from Above, back a group, Death from Above, back to her original spot. So she is pure glass cannon. Like if she gets hit, if somebody gets a good hit on her, she goes down, right? But the amazing thing is like within one turn, she could kill like 12 dudes on like her first turn. So it's pretty amazing. And there's just ways she has this thing where it's like she heals herself by cutting herself. She'll she'll point at an enemy and she'll cut herself. And then if she kills that enemy, she gets all the health back from cutting herself, the wounds that are caused by cutting herself. So it's like 8 wounds. And then she kills that enemy. She gets 17 wounds back.
Oh, fuck. Okay. Yeah. Holy shit. So she's just the combo queen. Like
queen. Her only downfall is, very, very agile, low defense, like glass cannon. I've had plenty of fights where it's just like, oh, and she's down. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and that. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fine. I'm sure there's things. It's the funny thing is like you can buff up her health and defense if you want to, but then you're not taking her awesome canon stuff.
Right. You're like missing the point.
You're missing the point. Like, yeah. And just like, no, just have her run through.
Just make her a goddamn atom bomb. That's it.
Like at a certain point, I think she has abilities that add to her movement points. So like it would be like her next move, and we're like, well, she can go anywhere on the map right now. It's like
right.
So it's cool. I'm having fun with the I haven't even gotten to the DLC part. This is just the character that was added during the DLC.
Nice.
So it's a lot of fun. It's also neat replaying it because the updates, there's more named characters now on your crew on the that run the ship. Like there's the master of fire or whatever, the guy who puts out the fires, who's like who runs the firemen on the ship.
Oh yeah.
Like Infernus Master or whatever. His only job is putting out fires.
There are plenty of them. Yeah,
there's plenty of them. What I was about to say is that the death cult is actually in your ship, but because your ship, like their church is in your ship, but because the ship is so goddamn huge,
right? It's the size of a city. Yeah,
that it's like, well, nobody's actually ever been down there aside from these blood spinners or whatever. So I think part of the DLC is actually trying to find it within your ship.
Yeah, it's that I love that aspect. I've been reading the Night Lords trilogy. They're one of my favorite Chaos chapters, and the ship that they're in, you forget how massive it is, and then they'll mention the menials, the people who work there and live there and stuff, and how it's got its own economy and traders and all that shit. It's wild. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that like you have these ships and there's the size of cities and there's people on these decks that are just living, being like cradle to grave, and they might not ever even get off the ship.
That's all they'll ever know.
That's all they'll ever know. And they don't even necessarily understand, like they wouldn't even necessarily know like the ship is under attack all the time. You know what I mean? Like,
no, they're not in a position to, unless they're in a position to know.
Yeah.
And they probably aren't.
And then like one day, the arch enemy showed up on their deck and turned Johnny's child into a blue demon, and it killed 15 people before the master at arms had a squad put it down.
Right. And they still don't know what the fuck happened.
They don't know what happens.
And they talk amongst themselves and they're like, wait, it just becomes an urban legend. No, that shit is, that stuff is very cool. I love how deep that shit goes.
Yeah. So that's what I've been playing.
Nice.
What have you been playing?
First and foremost, I finished Cyberpunk 2077.
Oh, okay.
Had a lot of fun with
Did you play the DLC? Did you have the DLC with it, or?
No, I have not. I'm going to get to it eventually.
Okay.
I'm trying really hard to just really, I've created a list on my library spread on Steam, called credits in 2025. And I'm just trying to encourage myself to, rack up as many back catalog stuff that I can. And Cyberpunk 2077 is one of the more recent ones. But I had a blast with it. It's an enjoyable enough game that I'm sure I will come back to it.
Yeah. I think it's got some replayability in there.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Wish I had played it before we read No Coincidences.
Did it feel like, did that book make sense with that?
In retrospect, it fit in very, very nicely.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we get another. Is there another
Cyberpunk? I mean, the Cyberpunk tie-in media has been pretty good so far.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind giving another one of those a try. That's fun. I got one called. Oh, this is never mind. Anyway, so I really enjoyed that. That was really good. In the interest of going the exact opposite route of the AAA high budget, wide open world city of a game that Cyberpunk 2077 was, I played Harvester next.
Okay.
Harvester is an FMV game. I think I
remember it.
Yeah, it came out in 96. I think the thing about Harvester is it would have absolutely caused the level of stir that games like Night Trap caused, but actually with reason. It is foul. It is very violent. There's no nudity or anything, but it's very overtly sexual at times. And
it's on sale for $1.49 right now on Steam.
It's not a bad purchase. Yeah, it's not a good game. I want to say that right off the bat. It is appropriately enough, it is incredibly Lynchian.
Okay.
Clearly the person who made this game, who wrote this game, loved David Lynch, but didn't quite have the presence of mind to fully grasp what David Lynch was doing.
Sure.
So it's kind of like, it's like Baby's first attempt at being Lynchian. And honestly, it's not terrible in that sense. The storyline is very, we've mentioned with FMV games, it's very over the top. It's very campy.
Right.
It's silly. You play this guy who wakes up in this 50s style, town. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know how he got there, but it's this creepy Stepford Wives kind of town here in this town called Harvest. And, you have to try and join this lodge, quote unquote, to find out the truth and find out what's going on. And as you do, you do your standard point and click stuff. There's a more than its fair share of moon logic at times. And it is one of those games, kind of like Phantasmagoria, where it would behoove you to let yourself die every now and then.
Sure.
Because it is that's half the fun, seeing the different ways that your character can die. The first half of it is point and click mystery stuff. And then you get into the lodge and you start using a combat system. It's still point and click stuff, but there's like 90% more fighting.
Okay.
And the fighting is dog shit.
That is expected.
Fucking terrible. It is
FMV
fucking
fighting.
Terrible. It's terrible. It's not fun. It's not well thought out. It's bad. And it to the point that I looked up cheats, and they're still old school, type in this thing and you get infinite lives or whatever style cheats that still work.
Right.
Even on the Steam version. And I just made my guy invincible and plowed my way through the last half of it. And I don't regret it. It's a very interesting, and as I said before, it could have started an uproar in the same way that Mortal Kombat.
100%. Just looking at the screenshots. I remember I vaguely remember when this game came out, just from mentions in gaming magazines, I believe.
Yeah. And it could have done that, if anyone played it. I don't think it did very well. I think it was largely ignored, until the lovely people at Night Dive Studio came in and re-released it for us. And now I've seen a few, YouTube videos of people commenting on it. It's an experience. It is not a good game.
Right.
But it is weird as shit. It is an absolute time capsule of that era. And I think that alone makes it worth a look, especially if, like you pointed out, you can get it for $1.50. But don't challenge yourself. Use a walkthrough. Just go through it and enjoy it. I played a couple of demos. Neither of them really jumped out at me. The first one was Fossil Fuel 2, because I'm going to continue to play the demos of these indie dinosaur survival horror shooter games until one of them is good. I want a good one. This was not it. This one seems a little more self-aware, but it's very janky. It doesn't play well.
Yeah.
It's got some interesting moments, like all these do. There's something there, but I just didn't think it was worth it. I'd recommend taking a look at some videos of people playing the demo. It's got some really interesting moments, some very cool moments, but it's not very good. I played the demo for Hunter the Reckoning, the Beast of Glen Kildove.
Is that the entire title?
Yes.
Okay.
Because Hunter the Reckoning is an old school White Wolf game.
Sure.
And the adventure is called The Beast of Glenkildo.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. And like actually more than a few old White Wolf properties, it is a fully text game. It's an interactive novel, essentially, a choose your own adventure. But you do get stats that you can upgrade and stuff like that. So there are, moves to be made, but it's a very reedy game, which I find really interesting. It just didn't, grab me.
It didn't move you.
No, but I do think that if anybody's listening who likes the old White Wolf properties and likes that kind of thing, likes the lit RPGs and stuff like that.
What are the other White Wolf games?
Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse.
Which Vampire the Masquerade might be coming out this year? The new one?
Yeah, Bloodlines 2. So far, it is scheduled for 2025. We shall see. But so it's a good property. It's fun. And I was impressed with the level of gamification it has for it being essentially a choose your own adventure novel.
Right.
It's more than that. And I was pretty impressed with that aspect. It just didn't grab me. But that's me. That's what I've played.
All right. Well, that'll do it for tonight's episode. Folks, if you can do us a solid, recommend us to your friends, to your family, to your enemies, to your coworkers, to your fellow parishioners at the Church of Satan, to your fellow parishioners at the Church of regular vanilla God.
Regular original recipe God.
Original recipe KFC kernels. Go to a KFC and say, hey,
I'll have a God bucket.
I'll have a God bucket. And have you ever heard of Pixel It? And then
I love it.
They'll see what happens,
Yeah.
Not a lawyer, not telling you to go do that. So go Patreon, follow us on Patreon, follow us on Blue Sky, and hop on our Discord. Join the conversation. It's a lot of fun. Have a good night, everybody, and we will talk to you next time at the top of the 11th hour. God damn it, that's the wrong book.
Ooh.